Uh, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are speaking to you from the Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I encourage you to take a moment and reflect on the different traditional Indigenous territories that you are working from today or joining with us from today as you partake in this presentation. Okay, so my name is Geraldine and I work at the Public Service Commission for the Government of Canada, and I'm so happy that we could connect today. Okay, so I'll be sharing my screen. 1 second here. Okay. I want to help you navigate through some of the hiring programs that we have for the federal government for persons with disability and how to apply to federal government jobs and to share some tips as an HR advisor. And the presentation will be about 20 minutes. And as Kerri said, we'll be reserving questions at the end of the presentations. So you can apply in different ways to improve your chances of finding the right career path for you. As the Public Service Commission of Canada, we are committed to encourage diversity and inclusion. To do so, we've created recruitment inventories that are targeted to persons with disabilities. When you apply to an inventory, you're not applying to a specific position, but to be in a qualified pool of candidates to help staff potential vacancies in the future. You will go through assessments like you would for a specific position. In the end, if you pass all the assessments, you'll be placed in what we call a pool of qualified candidates. The advantage here is that hiring managers from federal government departments can access and request people from these pools who match certain criteria to hire someone. Another way is on our Government of Canada jobs portal. You will be able to search through hundreds of specific job opportunities that are offered by federal organizations. In this presentation, I will talk about some recruitment initiatives for persons with disabilities and give you some tips on how to apply. So, a report from the 2019 Nothing Without Us, an accessibility strategy for the Public Service of Canada, created a vision to make Canada's public service the most accessible and inclusive in the world. And here's some initiatives that work towards this goal. The Government of Canada Workplace Accessibility Passport is a tool for the public service employees to share information needed to get the support measures required to succeed. The passport is owned by the employee, who will use it to describe the barriers that he, she, they face in the workplace. It will document possible solutions, devices, or supports received in the past, and the adaptive tools that the employee would like to bring with them, should they change jobs or organizations. Another initiative is the Lending Library Pilot Project. It's a fast-tracked accommodations process put in place to quickly provide hardware, software, resources, and tools to public service employees. It offers ongoing support to employees and their managers. The Accessibility, Accommodations, and Adaptive Computer Technology, that's ACT, that program offers a wide range of adaptations, alternate approaches, tools, training, services, resources, and adaptive computer technologies for public service employees with disabilities or injuries. It allows you to explore, experiment, and learn about inclusive design, collaborative workplaces, and adaptive solutions. So that's just some of the initiatives that we have going on. Whether you're at the start of your career or a professional with several years of experience, here are two inventories for graduates with disabilities. We have Digital Careers, which is a top priority for the Government of Canada, which has the largest technology operations in the country. Our work is fundamental to providing secure online access to services, ensuring Canadian values are included in the use of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies, unlocking the potential of open data, and enabling the way to the digital age. Now, if your experience or other types of training are equivalent to a 2-year post-secondary education, or if you have successfully completed 2 years of post-secondary education in computer science, information technology, or another specialty relevant to the position. Another Another inventory that we have is the policy and data analysts one that's listed on GC Jobs. The data policy analysts in the public service are as varied as the number of departments and agencies in the government of Canada. So you could be working in data analysis and develop research, studies, forecasts, and surveys to uncover economic or sociological effects of our projects, programs, and policies. Or you could be involved in policy analysis, where you're developing policies, programs, and economic development activities that support government priorities. Positions require a bachelor's degree with an acceptable specialization in economics, sociology, or statistics. So if you think you have the specialization through a combination of education and training and experience, please share this information in your application. We also have a student inventory for students with disabilities called the Employment Opportunity for Students with Disabilities. You are eligible for this program if you're a full-time student returning to full-time studies in the next academic year and that you meet the minimum age requirement to work in your province. This includes students with physical or emotional disabilities deemed to have full-time status by their academic institution. And you can find these inventories on our GC Jobs website. Okay, so the next slide is showing a screenshot of our website on canada.ca, GC Jobs. So applying for jobs on the GC Jobs website is your best bet to finding employment with the federal government. Here, this website will provide you with all the access to the different employment opportunities within the federal government. Now, although you don't need an account to search, you can search anytime you want, but you do need to create an account to apply. So you may benefit from creating one before you start searching. That way you can apply as soon as you find an interesting opportunity. The Create an Account link is on the right-hand side, and it will allow you to register into our system, where all the database applications, which is the database for all the applications. So once you've entered your information, it will remain in your account for future opportunities. So it's important to save your login information. I suggest that you create a profile to receive job alerts. So with job alerts in your profile, you can select your search filters, such as locations. So for example, if you're looking for jobs in specific locations, let's say like Ottawa or Halifax, or Ottawa and Halifax, or for certain government organizations, the system will automatically send you an email whenever a job is posted that meets your criteria. So this way you won't miss postings as soon as they're posted for the ones you set your preferences for. And this is because a job ad may be only posted for 24 hours or 3 days. So those are really short periods of time. So, and you want to apply before it closes. Okay. The next slide is a screenshot of a job search page. So on the job search page, you will find jobs available to the public across the country. You can browse for job ads and use filters to refine your search. You can search for jobs by work location, government organization, and a number of other criteria. Now, please note that if you're searching by work location, you might find it easier to search by the province where you want to work. In doing so, you will see any job opportunities mentioning a specific location in this province, or those job ads stating various locations across Canada. So it's often easier to just search by jobs in a particular province and go through the effort of scrolling through all the job ads. They will be sorted by closing date from soonest to latest. Now, on this slide, we have some job poster terminology. So by clicking on the job poster, you'll have some information related to the department, the location. The job poster may show the various tenures that the manager is considering hiring. Indeterminate means permanent employment, or determinate or terms, which are temporary employment, where there is an end date. The salary is usually displayed as a range. There is a section called Who Can Apply, and when it's open to the public, where it will read as open to persons residing in Canada and Canadian citizens residing abroad. Preference will be given to Canadian veterans and Canadian citizens in that order. So other posters may have their who can apply be restricted to one or more departments or to certain employment equity groups or to a geographic area. So if you're not sure if you are within the who can apply, you can ask for more information by emailing the contact listed at the bottom of the page of the job ad. Another element that's on the poster is the closing date, and it's very important to apply before that date, as the system will not allow you to submit your application after that date. Now, below the job posting box, you will find information regarding assessment, what you must provide when applying, essential qualifications, conditions of employment, and many other important considerations. So let's go over some key sections contained in the job advertisement. The intent of the process is the reason the process was launched. It may be for immediate needs or future needs, and this will indicate whether the job posting is for a specific number of position or to create a pool, or if it's for an inventory where you will be assessed at a later date. The essential qualifications, that's another important element, and it's one of the most important sections. You will not be able to submit your application if you indicate that you do not meet the essential qualifications, and you will be screened out if you don't clearly indicate how you meet these requirements. Essential qualifications include education and experience that you need to have in order to apply. Another element that's included in the job ad is maybe needed qualifications or asset qualifications. I like to think of these as the nice to have requirements for the position. You do not need to have any of the asset experience criteria in order to apply to the position, but they could be used to decide who will be hired. So we encourage you to clearly indicate how you meet those qualifications. Often when you apply, you will be asked screening questions related to the essential and asset qualifications. Make sure you give yourself enough time when applying to fully answer these screening questions. It can take a long time. Another thing that you will see on the job poster are language requirements. You will see that some positions are bilingual, others are English or French essential, and some jobs are posted with various language requirements. The bilingual positions will be bilingual imperative, meaning that you must meet the language requirements upon appointment. The poster will indicate what skill level is required for the position. Level C is the highest level, B is an intermediate level, and the lowest level is A. You will typically see 3 letters which indicate the skill level required in reading, writing, and speaking in that order. So when you see BBB/BBB, it's indicating that you require B levels or intermediate levels in both official languages. Now, if you have, again, any questions on the position or your application, you can always contact the information, use the contact information at the bottom of the poster. Note that it could take some days to receive an answer. If you need accommodations, inform the contact person as soon as possible. Now, please read the entire job ad, including the notes. There's a lot of details to look over. And if it interests you and you have the qualifications, you're now ready to apply. So you would click on the apply online link and it takes you to what is shown on our next slide. Now this slide is showing a screenshot of a checklist that you need to complete to submit your application. If you've applied on GC Jobs before, you'll be familiar with this screen. So once you click on Apply Online on the job ad, you will be redirected to the screen, which will allow you to ensure that you have completed all the sections required. The list of requirements will vary depending on the position. The red X's on the right-hand side indicate information that has not yet been submitted but is required. If you see green triangles, that indicates optional information. The employment equity section is optional. You don't have to complete it to apply. However, some job opportunities are restricted to people self-declaring as belonging to an employment equity group. if it is the case, the employment equity section will be required to submit your application. And you will not be able to submit your application until all the fields on the right-hand side are green, and they'll be signified with a check mark. So once they are all green, be sure to submit your application by clicking on Submit Application. So don't forget to do that. Okay, so now this slide, I just want to talk about some tips for your resume. So your resume should highlight how you meet the qualifications. I would like if you could focus on what is listed on the poster. I suggest to use verbs in the past tense. List your work experience, starting with the most recent, and make sure you identify the start and end dates, the title of the position, and if it was a position with the federal government, include your classification and the department. So please provide clear examples that are detailed and concrete. Try to avoid general terms that encompass many skills. Try to be specific. And make sure that your resume covers how you meet the education and experience requirements posted on the ad. The hiring managers will use the resume to ground truth your screening questions. So make sure that the information on your resume matches your answer to the screening questions and or your cover letter. Think of your resume as the secondary source of information. Information on the resume could be used to verify what you've written. And if they don't match, it could cast doubt on your application. So let's, make sure it all matches. You don't need to go through the trouble of formatting your resume. You just need to keep it clear with dates. You can just copy and paste and upload your resume from your computer directly into the system, and it will do that as a rich text format. List your qualifications, experience, and skills related to the position to which you are applying, and this could include transferable and relevant work experience, which could include part-time or temporary work experience, sports and recreational activities, volunteer work, assignments, special projects, co-op placements, or internships. You can certainly be succinct and concise, but it is okay to go over the industry standard of a 2-page resume and a 1-page cover letter. Okay, so this is on our next slide, we're discussing screening questions. So here in the screenshot, the first screening question, it's a screenshot of the first screening question, where it's asking about your education with a box asking you to select yes or no, and another box for you to type in to explain how you meet the educational requirement by providing concrete examples such as the diploma obtained, the educational institution, the duration, and other items. So as part of the application process, you will be asked screening questions. And this will probably take a lot of time to answer, but it helps the hiring manager learn about your experience. When we ask screening questions, we're asking you to fully explain when and how you obtained the experience. I know that this can contravene what you would do for a resume for a private sector job, but applications to the federal government like seeing the detail on how you meet the qualifications. So not providing enough information or sufficient details could result in your application being screened out, even if you have the experience and education required for the position. And if you say no to any of these questions, you will be screened out. So where it says yes or no and you say no, that's where you'll be screened out. So please use specific and concrete examples of your work experience. I like to tell people to use the STAR method, where you provide the situation, describe the tasks, actions, and the results. Dates and where the experience was acquired are also important. And so, for example, if we're looking at the qualification of client service and you just write down Walmart greeter, I really don't know what that is. All I know is that Walmart greeter welcomes me and gives me a card. But meanwhile, they could be the first point of security to alert entry of a violent person or an intoxicated person. And they could also be responsible for first aid. So we can't assume what you do in that job based on the title of the position or the classification. So that's why we need you to describe what your duties are. It's not enough to say, refer to my resume, or I have X number of experience. We're looking for the details that explain how you met the experience. So for example, a good answer would be like, in my role of blank at employer X, I wrote reports related to the name of blank system. For example, in January 2018, I wrote a report on the benefits of improving the system. In order to do this, I had to conduct research through several academic journal studies in order to determine, and then it further explains and whatnot. So we need to see those kind of details in those responses. Some screening questions will ask for experience in more than one area. So for example, the question could be experience in Microsoft Excel, Word, and Outlook. In these cases, make sure you provide examples for all three. If you provide examples for one or two of the experiences, your application may be screened out. I know that your work experience might have provided you to work as part of a team. Be careful not to say too much, we did this work. I need to see what your contributions were to the team project. So you should focus on what you did and what results you accomplished. We need to know how you proceeded to accomplish these responsibilities and what you've learned from that experience. So as always, be careful with your grammar and make sure there's no mistakes. In some cases, departments may use your answers to assess your written communication skills. So again, screening questions can take a long time to respond to, so please manage your time well in order to submit before the closing date. I suggest, for a tip, that you write your responses into a separate Word document and cut and paste your responses into the screening question response box on the system. You will not risk the page timing out on you while you're writing your answers, as the system will automatically disconnect you after 60 minutes. Some questions might recur, or you might see questions repeat in other job ads, especially like if you are a nurse or if you're in information technology. You will have had answered in other job applications. So you can review your answers and simply update them when necessary, but be careful not to copy and paste without fully reading the question. Some questions look similar, but they're not exactly the same. But at least you have something to build on. Okay, so self-declaration, what is it? We're trying to create an environment where diverse perspectives are valued, and it begins with self-declaration. Self-declaring is voluntary, but strongly encouraged, as we can only have accurate information on our workforce if you complete the self-identification section of your application. Self-declaration is a mechanism that allows applicants to identify themselves as members of a particular employment equity group, so that the public service understands the needs of its workforce, so we can remove barriers to equal opportunity for all and accommodate the needs of people with disabilities. So when you self-declare, it will enable you to access jobs open specifically to members of an employment equity group. So who can self-declare? When applying, you will be asked to indicate if you identify as a woman, an Aboriginal person, and just to clarify that this entails only First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, not Indigenous people from other countries, as they would be a member of a visible minority group, persons with disabilities, and members of visible minorities. So you may self-declare as belonging to more than one employment equity designated group. Here are some examples of disabilities that are listed here. From temporary limitations such as recovering from an injury, visible functional limitations such as visual or mobility issues, to invisible functional limitations such as environmental illnesses or learning disabilities. The Personnel Psychology Center over at the Public Service Commission has accommodated a variety of functional limitations. Okay, so just some reminders. Please read the entire job poster, including the notes, and follow the instructions they provide. Be sure your application is in before the deadline. Don't wait until the last minute to start the application process. The application process in particular, the screening questions can take time to complete. So give yourself time to put your best foot forward. So ensure that the information on your cover letter or screening question answers match your resume. And remember, keywords are not enough. You must provide specific examples in your application to demonstrate how you meet the essential qualifications listed. Submit what is only asked. Sometimes a cover letter is not required. And remember that accommodations are there to help you. So be sure to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And now you've applied. And so once you've applied, and the next steps may be screening, assessments, will be conducted, and it may be multi-step depending on the position and the qualifications being assessed. Interviews may take place. Usually it could be in person, but nowadays it could be by phone or video chat, and reference checks may be conducted. So now my colleague Ksenia, who works at a hiring department, will talk about accommodations that a government department can provide to help you do your best on the assessments. I wish you guys all happy National Accessibility Week. Over to you, Ksenia.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Wonderful presentation and great tips. I learned as an HR advisor as well. There were great reminders for myself when I'm applying on the jobs. Thank you very much. All right, so hello everybody. That's thank you for a wonderful opportunity to speak. I'm going to be touching on the topic of accommodation during the assessment process. And thank you, Camila, for bringing up the presentation. And Camila and I, we represent the Public Services and Procurement Canada Federal Government Department. So basically, I work for human resources and I help with staffing. So I deal directly with the hiring managers, and we do receive those applications that come through GC Jobs. Next slide, please. So assessment accommodation helps remove potential barriers related to testing, be that written exams or tests or oral interviews, so that you can demonstrate your abilities to your fullest capacity. Next slide. Who can request an accommodation? And the answer is anybody who needs it. That's a short answer. The long answer and legalistic answer is that accommodation is for any need relating to one of the 13 prohibited grounds for discrimination set out in the Canadian Human Rights Act. And those grounds are race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sex orientation, gender identity or expression, marital status, family status, including childbearing, genetic characteristics, disability, and conviction for an offense for which a party has been ordered. So basically, I think my connection was down for a moment. Are we okay now? Yes? Hello? Yes, very good. So basically that means anybody who needs an accommodation can request it. But how do you go about that? As Geraldine mentioned, you should do that as soon as possible. And your first opportunity is when you see a job ad. When you scroll down to the bottom of that page, there always will be a contact name provided. And that's going to be a real person who deals with this appointment process. Don't be afraid if sometimes you see a very long generic email. Somebody is checking at it all the time during the time that the poster is up. So if you see anything on the poster that you feel will prevent you from showcasing your best ability on this process, you should contact us directly right away and voice your concern. And again, remember that disability is not the only ground for which you can get your accommodation. Other grounds as well, the ones that are listed. Next slide, please. So you may wonder, what is your role in all of this accommodation process? Your role is crucial, and you should start this conversation. If you require assessment, the accommodation adjustment of the assessment tool, it is your responsibility to let us know. We are human resource advisors here. We are the bridge between the candidates and the hiring managers. When the managers receive your applications, they don't know you. They don't know what needs you have. So it's your role to let us know right away. So how does it look? First, you let us know you need accommodation. And it's the best way is to provide as much background information as you can and as needed. That could be a medical certificate, but stating the diagnosis is not enough and sometimes is not. Sometimes it's not needed. What we need to know is what are your limitations and how we can help you to remove the barriers. It's possible that through your life, you've dealt with accommodation before, and if it worked, it would be great if you share that experience with us. For example, if you were studying at the university and you went through Accessibility Center and they've provided you with recommendations on how to write the tests, for example, or pass the exams. If those accommodations worked for you, that would be great if you shared them with us. Once we gather all the information, we pass that information to the hiring managers and needed specialists, and we will create a report that will outline how we can help you, what accommodations will be given to you. Then your responsibility is to review that report again and see if you agree with it, or if you have objections, you need to let us know what further adjustments should we make, or maybe completely different approach we should take. So this is work in progress, back and forth until we agree on that, and then the assessment can start or continue. And remember that this is not the last time that you have a chance to voice your concern. Throughout the assessment process, you will be getting communication. First, when you're screened in, then when you're invited to the next step of the assessment, you will always be reminded that if you need accommodation, please contact us as soon as possible. Even if during the assessment process, you've agreed to some kind of accommodation, but you see in the moment that it's not working, you don't feel comfortable continuing, you need to let us know. So we'll stop that accommodation, stop that assessment, we'll reassess. It will take time to come up with an alternative, but we are here to do that. So don't let us know. Better to let us know in a moment than go through an uncomfortable accommodation process, uncomfortable assessment, finish it, feel bad about it, get bad results, and then come to us. That would be tough to fix later on. Okay, so next slide, please. Sometimes people feel that their candidacy will be affected by asking for accommodation. They don't want to complain, they don't want to make, they just don't want to let anybody know about that, fearing the negative consequences. But the process is opposite. We'd like to provide positive results for you. We'd like to help you to be successful in selection process, and we can make adjustments to the assessment tools. The only thing you need to remember that the adjustments will not change the qualifications. You will still be assessed for the qualification that is required and to the proficiency level of the qualification. It's the way that you're assessed may be changed. For example, if the job requires ability to do A, B, and C, we will not remove the C part. We may be assessing it differently. And at the end, we're all here for a success story. We would like you to succeed. The manager would like to hire a qualified candidate that is able to do the job. It's not that that candidate wrote the written test on a piece of paper. That's not what is important. All we need to know is that you can do the job and you meet the qualification that is required. Next slide, please. What happens after a request accommodation? Like I said, we gather all the relevant information from you. and we pass that information along to the hiring manager and the specialist within the department. If the tools that we're using are created within our own department, we can consult a psychologist center at Public Service Commission, but we don't have to. On the other hand, if we're using the tools that were created by Public Service Commission, we will forward your accommodation request to them because they are the experts on their tools and they know how to do those accommodations. And remember always that every request is dealt on a case-by-case basis. When you provide information about accommodation that was given to you before, that is important. If there was accommodation that was given to somebody else on some another process, that could be helpful, but not necessarily the information that we're looking for. Remember, it is always specific to your particular case and this particular assessment. So once we have it figured out, we'll move on with assessment. Next slide, please. So you may wonder what type of accommodations are available and most common, and we'll go over them one by one. And number one is setting. So settings are modifications in a testing environment, test settings, location, to alter the environment of the assessment. That could be providing you with individual assessment session. For example, before pandemic, people were writing tests as a group in a big room. Sometimes people needed just a quiet room when they can write on their own. Another option is a special desk or a chair that would provide the physical support that is needed. It could be a change of the test location if there is no, if the old location is not wheelchair accessible, and anything that has to do with the physical settings. The response format involves modifications to the way that the candidates respond. That can allow individuals with disabilities to give responses using their preferred communication mode. For example, the applicant can use a tape recorder or a computer or braille writer or their own adaptive equipment to answer the questions. The potential employer can provide speech-to-text software. An electronic answer sheet can be used, or a scribe, someone who writes down the candidate's answers, can be provided. Now, there could be changes to the scheduling and time, and honestly, this is the ones that we're seeing all the time. For example, people are given extra time to complete the test, or there are built-in breaks during the assessment that the people can break for a moment and again in order to go through the whole assessment, because sometimes they take 1 or 2 hours. It's quite long. Or the timing of the test can change. For example, if you perform better in the morning or in the afternoon, that can also be accommodated. Finally, the presentation format. It means altering the medium used to show the instructions or questions to the candidate. So we can provide a test booklet in Braille or with larger print or even in audio format. It can be a computer-based test instead of one-on-one interview. We can provide a live reader, someone who reads the questions aloud to the candidate, or we can provide instructions through use of sign language. And there might as well be other modifications. So it is all on case-by-case approach. Next slide, please. So does accommodation continue once I'm hired? Yes, of course. It is manager's responsibility to work with the employee to identify limitations and gain access to the tools required to perform the job in a satisfactory way. At PSPC, we have a unit called Disability Management, and we have Accessibility Officer who will receive the file once the person is hired and will work together with that person on finding the right accommodation in the workplace. So the last slide. Come and play with us at PSPC. We have been named one of the Canada's best diversity employers for the 5th year in a row. Public Services and Procurement Canada is committed to achieving a competent workforce that reflects the diversity of the Canadian population. And we work hard to create a welcoming, respectful, and inclusive workplace throughout a variety of programs and initiatives. Some of our diversity inclusions achievements are 5 diversity networks with a national coordinator. We have a task force on anti-racism, workplace culture, and equity, a national reconciliation and Indigenous engagement unit, an ombudsman for mental health, an accessibility officer, like I said, and a gender-based analysis plus center of expertise. And once again, we do encourage you to self-declare as a person with disability when you're applying for a job. And that would mean that you lead the change. You will provide your unique perspective and talent to our workplace. And this way, you will also allow other persons with disabilities to form our public service that should be and striving to be representative of the population that we are serving. And like I said, my name is Ksenia, and I'm a chair advisor with Resourcing. And thank you so much, Camila, for helping to put together this presentation. And Camila is doing an amazing job working on diversity and inclusion and public service commission. We do have a fun place to work for, that is for sure. Thank you very much.
That is just absolutely wonderful. That's been so much information from both parties today, and you know, it's a lot sometimes to digest all of that information. And you know, we're really grateful that we had the opportunity to speak and also continue to speak. So we did have some questions come in as the conversation was happening, and I'd like to get to those. But I'd also like to remember any of the viewers that are available through YouTube. If you have a question, please go in the chat. And like Ksenia said, it's very individualized. And so if you have a question that you think is very personal to yourself and to your situation, we do suggest that you hold on to those questions and send them directly to myself. So it's Kerri at reachability.org, Kerri, and then we'll be able to field them in the right direction and get some actual support for you. Okay, so if you don't mind, I will go back to Geraldine. The first question came in when you were speaking, and it was just looking for a little bit of clarification on some of the experience and qualifications. So the question is, if you are unsure if you have the correct experience or qualifications, and/or should you say that you have that qualification and ask for further clarification afterwards so that you don't get screened out? Sometimes that experience, you're just not really sure if it fits or if the education piece is just quite right. Should you just go ahead anyway and then kind of talk about it a little further so you don't lose the opportunity?
Well, there's a couple things that I would probably bring to mind for when you're thinking about this. The first thing you can do is actually try to reach out to the contact shown at the end of the job poster. Sometimes they'll definitely provide an email, but sometimes they provide a phone number, and reach out to them and ask for clarification there, because they might be able to have you ask that question to the actual hiring manager, depending on the situation. Now, when you apply online, okay, one thing, I don't know if you remember on my presentation, we had a job checklist. One of the first things that you do that's listed on the job checklist of requirements that you need to submit is what is referred to as a notice. And when you are, that's where you're confirming that the information that you are providing is true and that you understand that it will be verified. So, and that's in order to discourage you from providing false or fraudulent information. So when you're looking at the qualification, I always like to tell people, like, have a look at it. Don't say yes if it's really no or sort of. So because you don't want to misrepresent yourself. So, but if you think you do have the qualification, you'll be required to explain it, obviously in the screening question response. So, you know, do that and have a look at your response, and if you feel like you've given enough examples and you feel like you've provided enough information to be screened in, you can submit it, and really at the other end there'll be a group of people, and it might be a combination of HR and the hiring manager, or the hiring manager might have gotten somebody in his team to help review your responses to your screening questions and to look at the information on your resume. And they will determine if you have the experience that is required. So there's a couple options there for you to do, but it's always good to reflect and be self-aware as well. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know, Ksenia, if you have anything to add.
I would say that if the ad is calling for 5 years of experience and you only have 2, then it's clear. When the qualification is calling for extensive experience and you think it's extensive, provide that information. It's not an automatic screening. As Geraldine said, the hiring manager on that side will always look at it and see if that meets his needs. Mm-hmm. So if you're unsure just a little bit, I would say go for it and provide as much information as possible. And it is still a possibility that you would be screened out by a human on that particular screening information. But also, like Geraldine said, be mindful of your time. There will be other opportunities, and it takes a long time to complete those questions and answers. So do apply for the jobs that you feel that you really qualify for, and that will take a lot of your time for sure.
Yeah, excellent. And just in kind of in part with that, you know, we do think about time, and we're cognizant of or aware of how long each question is taking. And we had mentioned, you know, make sure you provide a lot of examples. Would it just be like, I know Geraldine, you had said like, you know, there might be Microsoft and Outlook and something else that you want to touch. Would it be just like one example for each of those specific things? Or if it's a specific, you know, qualification, is it just one example you want to offer, or is it several, or does it just kind of depend on the question?
I think like using the example that I gave, like where we're asking you to tell us what you have for Excel, Word, and oh my goodness, Outlook. I think if you have the ability, so for example, if it's Excel and you've done, let's say, spreadsheets and whatnot, maybe give me examples of the kind of spreadsheets that you did, what kind of formulas that you've used on Excel. So really, if you have a lot of experience, try to list it. Maybe don't go too overboard, like list 5 examples for how many formulas that you have. Like you could go on and on, I'm sure, for some of you, because, you know, but not for me. But I think it would depend on how the question's worded as well. So I love how Ksenia was saying extensive. So when they say extensive, and over at our end too, we're trying to be mindful of, you know, not assuming that people will understand what we mean by extensive, what we want. So we're defining, we're giving definitions. So like if we say the word significant, we try to define what that means. If we're saying the word recent, we're trying to define what that means. So I mean, if you have those examples, certainly put them down, maybe give 1 or 2 for, you know, but if you know way too many formulas, then maybe you might, it probably depends on the context of the position, but yeah.
And like you said, sorry.
Nope, that's okay. I was just going to add to Geraldine's part and just say it really, like, it does depend on the question. And I think that there will be certain questions where it'll be really clear, like, do you have a degree in this area? Yes or no? And then at that point, it's really, yes, here's my university. This is the date I graduated. Whereas like Ksenia's example with the, you know, do you have extensive experience? At that point, it would be advisable to really put in as many examples as you have. Because for us, the more information we have, the more we can confidently say, yes, here's how it shapes their entire experience and what they're able to contribute to the workplace if they were successful in this appointment. So from my personal experience, actually as an applicant, the more information you can put in that outlines the experience, the better. But it is always key to be succinct, kind of, you know, like to make sure you're not repeating yourself or you're writing in a couple sentences when it could just be one. So I guess the short answer to that is the more examples, the better, but making sure that you're writing in a very clear, concise way.
Excellent. Perfect. That was a big question, I know, and it's hard to kind of think about it in abstract when you don't have an actual question to kind of reflect on and look at. So it does vary. But what I was going to say just there a second ago was, if all else fails, like Geraldine said, there's that contact information at the bottom, and reach out and ask for some support. And if you feel like you're not sure, ask a few questions. It might take a little longer in the process, but it's more beneficial to take the time than to make a mistake.
I would second that. As an HR advisor right now, I have a poster up, and I do get the questions from people regarding the qualifications. They ask for clarification, and we get back to them. If it helps you, you can give me an answer by the end of the day, because that helps us as a contacts on the poster to manage our time as well in when do you need the answer. And yes, it would be tough on a 3-day poster.
Yes,
and I think that clarification. And if you can't wait, just go for it and provide all your details.
And I think that very, very, very closely relates to what Geraldine said earlier as well, is being connected in that notification, in the actual creating an account and getting that information right away, so that when there is a closing date that's coming quickly, you're able to act quickly and not wait and not see it until closer to the end. So you do have that time to be able to work through the process. That's excellent. So the next question that came in, I'm assuming it's coming in terms of a lot of people have been discriminated against in the past for disclosing their information. So the question is, what is the benefit of me self-declaring or self-identifying during the application process? And so I'm not sure, I open the floor to whoever might feel like they want to touch on that one first.
I can start, or if Geraldine wants to, I'm easy. Okay,
Right.
I can start with that. So, yeah, in terms of historically, I mean, there's lots of reasons why people over the years wouldn't self-identify. I know for myself, historically, when you disclose that sort of information about yourself, you have been in the past met with discrimination. So that fear and that hesitancy is completely valid. We are in the public service really moving towards change, right? In our culture, we've got these systems set up, and they're designed to create systems of equity rather than the historic oppression that may have been experienced in Canadian culture. And I think I just want to kind of bring it back to the benefits, like you were saying, Kerri, like why should you choose to self-identify if in the past there's been this fear? And that's because there's opportunities being created now. There's recognition in the public service that our representative levels of specifically people with disabilities does not match the representativity of Canadians of the workforce in Canadian culture, in the Canadian population. And so we want it to, right? We want a diverse place. We want people here that bring diverse abilities and perspectives. And so these systems now with our self-declaration are actually designed to be able to provide those opportunities. So like Geraldine mentioned at the beginning, you'll find a lot of application processes happening now that are restricted to employment equity groups. So as someone, if you're someone who identifies as having a disability, you actually have the opportunity to apply on that process, whereas somebody else who maybe doesn't identify as having a disability wouldn't have that opportunity. So these are designed now to create more and better opportunities for people. I will highlight that there's a difference between self-declaration and self-identification, and this is an important one. I know as someone who currently works for the federal government, I was very confused when I first started to understand these nuances. And this is actually where it's useful for people because you recognize that you have a choice in both matters. So the self-declaration part is the one that Geraldine was talking about, and this one is when you apply for a job. So this is if there's a selection process open and it actually says that it's restricted to only employment equity groups. That self-declaration piece is actually really important if you want an opportunity to apply on it, because if you don't self-declare, then that's closed off and you wouldn't be allowed to apply on the process. The self-identification piece is actually different, and that's an option that you can do once you're appointed. So that's if a hiring manager comes back to you, you've been successful in the selection process, and you've been hired into a job. At that point, the self-declaration piece doesn't actually matter anymore. You're in the federal government, you've got your job. It's the self-identification piece that's for internal data purposes. And that's voluntary as well. So once you've been hired through a selection process that maybe you self-declared on, you actually still have the choice later on. It's voluntary if you want to self-identify for internal data purposes. So there's kind of two pieces there. And obviously we encourage people to self-declare and self-identify so that we have accurate data available for us to make sure we've got good programs and services that meet our workforce. But those two things are based on your comfort level and your willingness. So they're both voluntary, and you have the choice after you've been appointed to do the second one if that's something that interests you. Don't know if Geraldine wants to add to that.
Thank you.
No, that was fantastic. Like all I have to add is that we're, every day we're learning that we're finding that diversity is bringing different perspectives to the team, and it's really building a stronger team. And that's being communicated quite intensely across the federal government. So I think we're also open to offering resources to hiring managers and educating them. So it's a very positive time, and it's very exciting because to see how it is evolving is very exciting for me as a public servant. So yeah, and thank you, Camila. That was a perfect explanation of that.
One last thing I'll add, actually, now that I've finished speaking, I was getting another idea. But the last thing I'll add is that the data is highly confidential. Like back to that piece that Kerri had mentioned, part of the question was, why should I self-declare if, I don't want people knowing that information about me, or I have a fear of being discriminated against. The information is extremely confidential. It's like really safeguarded. Only the people that have access to it are far and few between, and they're the ones that truly need access to it. So I guess just in terms of the comfort level there, knowing that once you self-declare or self-identify, that information isn't available to anyone in any department. It's safeguarded by the correct people in the right places, and only the people who need to know that information. Specifically, let's say if you're a person with disabilities and you're asking for accommodations, like Ksenia said, we're not asking for your diagnosis. We don't need to know exactly what it is that is your functional limitation. We need to know what it is we need to do to accommodate you. So it's more about X, Y, and Z is going to help you perform your best. So that's what the information we need. We don't actually need your diagnosis. So just a little bit there around the confidentiality piece for the data, because I think that's something that can sometimes get overlooked when we talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. And being a new face going into a workplace, if you've made those decisions, you don't know who else knows that information, and it can always be a strange first meeting for people. So it's really great to know that information is kept between very few people. Also, kind of in line with that is it's very step-by-step process, it seems. What if somebody does apply, but they don't identify or disclose right at first, like when they're applying, but then they realize they do need an accommodation? Are they still able to ask for an accommodation afterwards?
At any point during the assessment process, yes.
So you don't have to. Sorry, you don't have to officially
self-identify in the assessment. You can bring that.
So I think Ksenia's connection may have cut out, so I'll follow up where she left off. But that, exactly right. So basically, you don't need to self-declare. So that's the declaration piece on the selection process, instead of the identification piece, which is after you've been appointed. So you don't need to self-declare in order to request an accommodation. The accommodation can happen at any time during the process when you realize you might need one. And this actually goes back to the point where I know we're specifically talking today about people with disabilities, but you can request an accommodation for anything under the 13 grounds for discrimination under the Human Rights Act. So for example, if you are married and you have children or a family and you have kids that you need to pick up, you can say, I need my test in the morning because I need to pick up my child in the afternoon. And they can't discriminate against you based on that. So this is there's 13 grounds. There's a lot of reasons why you would ask for accommodation. When you're self-declaring, there's only 4 pieces, right? There's persons with disabilities, visible minority, woman, or Aboriginal person. So that piece isn't actually connected directly to the ability to ask for accommodation. So if you're worried you haven't declared that at the beginning and then later in the process you need to request an accommodation, that's absolutely fine.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. The wording of it just came out all wrong when I was asking. So thank you for clarifying.
And sorry, Ksenia, I know you lost your connection there. Hopefully I kind of helped out with the answer, but if you wanted to add anything now, I think your connection is back on.
Thank you. Thank you for answering it. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thanks.
Excellent. Oh, and here's a good question, but I'm assuming the answer to this is likely depending on the situation. Somebody asked, how long does the assessment process normally take? And I know, Ksenia, you said like some of the tests could be an hour or two, but I also know there are many parts to the assessment process. So does anyone want to talk a little bit about what that might look like?
I like to always remind people that staffing for a hiring manager is a project that's sort of like above and beyond their regular job duties. So it takes the time that they have to invest in the process. And so if they have an immediate need, it will probably move faster than if it wasn't. So our job as HR advisors are to help, remind the manager and cajole them to move to the next steps on the process. But I hear through the HR community that departments are trying to shorten the staffing process. They're very cognizant of, the applicant's experience. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, it has had an impact on our processes, which may have prolonged the timelines. But yeah, so I don't know if you want to speak to that, guys, but.
The answer always is, it depends. It depends on number of candidates. It could be hundreds. If we go external, and we're talking to external party here, it's most of the times it's national area of selection. It means people from all over Canada can apply, may qualify for location, and it could be hundreds and hundreds of people. If it's a very narrow skill set, that could be a less number of candidates that apply, and then it's faster to assess them just by the mere number of assessments that needs to take place. But the managers are getting innovative in the ways to assess, and the managers don't want to be working on a year-long process anymore, because the life changes and candidates do lose interest and move on to the other employers. So we do our best, but it could take a couple months. It could.
Yeah, I think just to round that out too, Kerri, I think your question was the assessment, right? The selection process. So like you were saying, that can involve a couple different assessments. So when we say assessment, that's exam, interview, that's your screening questions even as a part of that whole process. There's the reference checks, there's quite a few stages in there, with me. And then on top of that with a lot of people. So I think the short answer is it really can take months, the actual assessment. So I think candidates need to be prepared for that. And what I think is important is kind of when you're looking at applying for government, if you're unemployed currently and you want to be employed next week, that might not be the best option for you. We're not going to get through that process that quickly. But if you're currently employed and you're looking for new opportunities, then, that might be something that you can say, I'm willing to apply now. And in 6 months, I'm willing to see where I'm at in this process and kind of have gone through the process to then say, I'm qualified at this level and I'm able to be asked to, be appointed in a position, right? So it is a longer process that people need to be prepared for. The other part is then on top of that, if you are applying for a selection process and you're requesting accommodation, the accommodation piece does add another layer onto it. Now, the thing is, as we've gone through with the presentation, we're very equipped. We've got lots of processes in place to be able to provide you with these accommodations, but they do take even more time on top of the already established selection process kind of stages. So that's where we come back to. If you know that an accommodation would be useful for you, then letting us know as soon as possible is helpful, because we can start getting that process going. And then just being prepared for the roadblocks. So if we've offered an accommodation for, let's say, an exam and it didn't go according to plan, and you've realized that wasn't the right accommodation for you and you actually need a different accommodation, that's absolutely fine. We can do that. We can stop it in that moment. We can do the report again, like Ksenia said, we can provide a different accommodation. But again, that'll extend the assessment period, the selection process, a little bit. So I think the moral of the story is applying with federal government, it takes time. And I think that is the honest answer. And so if you're ready and you have that expectation and you know what to expect, then that will help you kind of move through the process and know kind of when you'll be able to expect those outcomes.
Excellent. And if it's okay, I'm just going to ask one more quick question. I know we're coming to our hour end here. When we're thinking about that whole piece of the assessment and kind of helping to move things along a little quicker, can you just clarify, it was asked in the comments, could you just clarify like what type of paperwork might be needed when you're requesting an accommodation? I know you said you don't have to have a specific diagnosis or anything, but is there some concrete things that need to be given in order to help that process?
It depends. It's a very annoying answer, but the truth is, it could be a note from your treating physician without disclosing diagnosis, setting out the limitation. Sometimes it's more complicated than that. Sometimes you do need to go for assessment to a specialist, and that can take time, and it could be costly, but it can be paid by the department for you to go through that assessment. So that's a very good information to know. But we have to see what's going on and come up with information for that particular case to see what is needed.
I suspected that might have been the answer. It seems very individualized, which I appreciate. Doesn't help so much with trying to help move things quickly along. But again, like Camila said, when you're getting into this process, just understanding that it is going to be a lengthy process, and just knowing that there are things you may need to do that might slow that process down or might speed it up is important. So I really appreciate that valuable information. Camila, I can see you looks like you may want to say something.
Yeah, I just going to add like and again appreciate Ksenia's comment. You know, it depends. It's an annoying answer, but also that can hopefully be liberating too, because if you know who you are, you know your body, you know your limitations, then then hopefully there's creative space in there for you to see where in your life you might be able to get some documentation. So again, like could be physician, could be a lawyer, could be like a therapist, could be a past manager as well, right? If you've worked in another company and you've had a manager that provided you accommodation and they've gone through a couple things and they have documentation of that, like that's helpful too. So it doesn't need to be a straightforward doctor's note. There's a lot of different things that could compile your portfolio to give us the information that we need. So it's more about kind of looking at your own life and saying like, here's my journey with my disability. These are all the things that I've gone through, all the things I've tried. Are there pieces in there that I can take out as documentation that would kind of provide a little bit of almost a binder to say, this is who I am and this is what I need. So in that flexibility, there could also be maybe it could be positive for you to know that it's not just A, B, and C that we need, but if you've got that documentation already there in a variety of formats, we will welcome it, because having that information helps us to figure out what's going to work on our end for you.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And I think that also ties in very nicely with me saying a little bit earlier that, we'd like to keep question and answer going all day if we could, but it is very individualized. And I would encourage those that do have questions that may be a little more specific to themselves to reach out to myself at Kerri at reachability.org. Again, it's Kerri at reachability.org. And I'll be able to help send those questions in the right direction and hopefully have them answered and help you along in the process. So with that being said, I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts or comments that they'd like to share.
I will. I've been talking a lot. I didn't get to see the presentation, so I'm like, hi, everyone. One last thing. I think Geraldine said it. Like, this is a good time to work for government. We want diverse perspectives. Like, we're excited to have these changes with our accessibility strategy for the public service that got released in 2018. Like, there's some big changes happening, and we're we're trying. I know we're in a big institution and things take a while to change, but we are making some headway right now. So I think my main thing is don't be afraid of that long email at the bottom. There is a real human being behind there and we want to talk to you. So yeah, just like Ksenia said at the end, come play with us.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate you all being here today. I know it's a big conversation and like I say, we could go on forever, but I'm going to tie it up. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And we definitely will have more conversations in the future that may look like some more workshops. So thank you for coming and I appreciate you and enjoy the rest of your day. And for everyone else joining us today, keep in mind there are a bunch of other really great conversations coming as well, including one on Saturday with myself, also looking at disclosing with some employers in Halifax. So that'll be a good conversation moving forward as well. And hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.